Welcome to the deep dive. We focus on analyzing source material, really digging in so you can get informed, fast, and thoroughly.
And today, we're looking at something pretty intense. It's the aftermath, the immediate and the longer-term picture of Hurricane Melissa hitting Jamaica.
Yeah, and this isn't just about the storm itself. It's about understanding it through a very specific lens. We're basing our whole analysis today on, well, a single, really powerful interview.
That's right, with Dean Jones. He's a resident there, but his background is what makes this so unique. He's got this incredible combination of skills.
Exactly. He's not just someone who lived through it. He's a chartered construction manager, a surveyor, a project manager, and a realtor, too. So he sees the damage on multiple levels.
He really does. It's not just, my roof is gone. It's about building codes, economic impact, national planning, all seen through the eyes of someone qualified to assess it.
So our mission today really is to use his expert perspective to go beyond the usual disaster headlines.
We want to understand how the physical destruction, the economic vulnerability of the island, and the personal crisis all kind of crash together. His testimony gives us a way into that.
And maybe we should start with just the raw power we're dealing with here. Hurricane Melissa. I mean, the wind speeds were unbelievable.
They really were. Peaking somewhere between 165 and 185 miles per hour. That's solid Category 5, pushing the absolute limits.
Just devastating force. And Dean Jones described it vividly, didn't he? Not just a bad storm, but...
He called it a scene out of the perfect storm.
Yeah.
And the terrifying part he mentioned was that feeling of, okay, maybe it's easing up now, only for it to get worse.
And it wasn't quick. It wasn't just one night.
No, that's crucial. He said the intense period started nightly, beginning Sunday, and just kept building, worsening right through Tuesday night. Imagine that, days of it.
That sustained pressure, that psychological element, it really changes things.
Absolutely. It's not just a single blow. It's this relentless battering. And that context is key when we start looking at the damage assessment he provides.
It means structures aren't just hit once. They're weakened and then hit again, harder.
Precisely. The duration amplifies everything. Okay, so let's get into what happened when the storm finally passed.
Right, the immediate aftermath. When dawn broke, Jones said he was understandably very nervous.
Yeah, you brace yourself, don't you? And what he saw, he said the world outside was just fundamentally different.
He's in Tower Isles, which is, about 5 minutes from Mo Bay. That's right, Montego Bay. And his description was stark. The landscape had totally changed.
And he elaborated on that, didn't he? Saying he could see things, buildings, structures that he'd literally never seen before from his location.
Yeah, think about what that implies in a tropical place like Jamaica. Dense foliage, maybe walls, smaller buildings.
Yeah.
All just gone, ripped away, cleared.
So you can suddenly see across distances you couldn't before because everything in between has been obliterated.
Exactly. And the trees, he used the word decimated.
Which means they're not just damaged, they're largely destroyed, no longer offering any kind of windbreak or buffer. Right, so everything else, houses, power lines, takes the full force. He did say some houses nearby only had localized damage.
But around him?
Serious damage, including the property he was actually in at the time. So it wasn't uniform, but it was significant right where he was.
And the first immediate problem was just being trapped.
He said, I can't leave this road. Just debris everywhere, things everywhere, was his phrase.
That isolation is terrifying, not just inconvenient. It cuts you off from everything, help, neighbors, supplies.
And it shows the immediate priorities. He mentioned, almost as an aside, that he hadn't even assessed the food damage yet.
Right. Because first things first, can I get out? Is the structure safe? Food comes later. It really highlights the acuity of the crisis.
Exactly. Which brings us back to his specific expertise. He wasn't just reacting, he saw this coming, in a way.
How so?
Well, with his background construction manager, surveyor, he said he knew what winds of 165, 185 mile per hour could do to a country like Jamaica, which is still developing. He anticipated the vulnerability.
That's a heavy thing to know, isn't it? Watching a storm approach and understanding, technically, just how bad the damage is likely to be.
It really is. And when he says developing country, he's pointing to, well, let's be frank, challenges with consistent building code enforcement, the high cost of really resilient construction materials, maybe informal building practices in some areas.
So a Category 5 storm doesn't just find the weakest house. It tests the weaknesses in the entire system.
Precisely. In a highly developed country, maybe it flattens certain areas, but here with strained resources, that kind of force challenges, well, almost everything that's been built.
Is that about poor standards necessarily, or just the economics? Can a developing nation realistically afford to make everything Cat 5 proof?
It's probably a mix, but I think the economics are huge. Look, Jones is a chartered professional. He knows best practices, but he also knows the reality on the ground.
The co-
The sheer cost of mandating things like, say, heavily reinforced concrete, advanced roof anchoring systems needed for those wind speeds. It's often just out of reach for average person, even for government projects sometimes.
So his point is that Jamaica's baseline resilience, while maybe adequate for lesser storms, was simply overwhelmed by this kind of modern, climate change-fueled megastorm.
That seems to be the implication. The existing standards or the enforcement of them just weren't matched for this level of force.
Okay, so beyond his immediate area, what picture did he paint of the wider damage? He was getting reports, right?
Yeah, from family, from pictures he was seeing. He mentioned severe flooding in a place called Orias.
And Black River?
That was described as total annihilation and destruction of buildings, just wiped out.
And the flooding, especially in certain areas. Mandeville was mentioned.
Yes, particularly the valleys around Mandeville. That's where the water really funneled. He described seeing houses completely underwater, just roofs that you could see.
Just the roofs sticking out. It's hard to even picture. That suggests incredibly fast rising water.
Trapping people, forcing them onto the only high ground available, which might be the roof itself.
And this is where that horrifying anecdote comes in, isn't it?
Yeah, the image he saw, or was told about, of a person flying off at the roof.
Just the wind physically lifting someone off.
It takes your breath away. That makes the danger so visceral. It's not just property, it's life and death, instantly. Forces beyond human control.
And that immediate danger, combined with the location reports, this must have hit him personally very hard.
Absolutely. Because he mentioned his in-laws. They live near Mandeville, right in one of those areas known for flooding, where he'd heard about the submerged houses.
So he has this technical knowledge of the risk, the reports of devastation in that specific area, and then probably communication blackout.
Exactly. Imagine that feeling, knowing the physics, knowing the geography, knowing the reports, and just silence from loved ones in the direct path. It's a particular kind of torture.
It connects the professional assessment directly to the human cost right there.
Definitely. And the damage wasn't just homes. The national infrastructure took a massive hit.
The airports. That's critical.
Both main ones, Kingston, Norman Manley, and Mo Bay, Sangster, were down, out of action.
Okay, so think about the implications. No international flights in or out, no aid arriving easily, no way for people to leave or for specialists to come in quickly.
It paralyzes the national response right from the start. Critical supplies, personnel, coordination, all severely hampered.
And this is where Jones, putting on his project manager hat, I guess, had an immediate critique.
He did. He pointed out there was another airport, apparently still functional, but it needed further expansion. He saw it as a strategic failure. Meaning you can't rely solely on two major coastal airports that are obviously vulnerable to hurricanes like this. His point was about foresight, about diversification.
The government needed to be more strategic, he said. Invest in making sure there's at least one, maybe more inland or better protected, resilient hub that can handle international relief efforts immediately after a disaster.
Right, because if your main lifelines are cut, the recovery is stalled before it even begins. It's about building redundancy into the system.
It's striking that even in the middle of the chaos, he's thinking about systemic fixes, about lessons learned for national planning.
That's the expert mind, isn't it? Seeing the immediate problem, but also the underlying strategic vulnerability. And that vulnerability, unfortunately, extends deep into the economy as well.
Yeah, let's pivot to that. Because the physical damage is just the first wave, the economic fallout. That's a whole different beast.
And for someone like Dean Jones, whose work is tied directly to property and construction, the professional crisis hit instantly.
His first thought was, I don't know where my business is now. That's terrifying.
Absolutely. Think about it. Realtor, construction manager, surveyor. His entire livelihood depends on a stable property market, accessible sites, client confidence. All of that just vanished overnight.
He mentioned clients calling him, worried about properties he had listed for them. Were they destroyed?
Exactly. A listing isn't just potential income. It represents work already done, marketing costs, professional reputation, all potentially wiped out.
It wasn't just current business. He talked about future plans, too.
Yeah, partnership agreements he was literally in the process of signing. Suddenly, they might not exist anymore. The foundation for future work just crumbled.
Years of building a practice, making connections, potentially gone.
And then came that really sobering reflection he shared. It wasn't just about the business, it was about basic survival.
Despite having 3 degrees in design, construction, surveying.
Yeah,
Highly qualified.
incredibly qualified. Yet he worried he may find myself like so many others, unable to earn enough to keep bread on the table.
Wow. If someone with his level of expertise, his credentials, his international experience, if he's worried about basic income after this.
It tells you everything about the depth of the economic shock. What hope does that leave for, the average worker, the small shop owner, the farmer?
It suggests the entire economic ecosystem is incredibly fragile. The storm didn't just damage buildings, it destabilized the very professions needed to rebuild.
Right, the architects, surveyors, project managers. The people you need for recovery are themselves facing financial ruin.
And this brings us, I think, to what you called the aha moment of this whole deep dive, the issue of insurance.
Yes. This is absolutely critical to understanding why recovery in places like Jamaica is so challenging, so different from, say, the US or UK after a similar event.
When Jones was asked about insurance coverage, his answer was pretty stark.
It really was the fundamental reality. Standard property insurance, the kind most homeowners in developed countries rely on, is simply not common practice in Jamaica for most people.
And the reason?
Cost. Plain and simple. He stated it's usually about 10 to 15 times more expensive than the UK, and likely more expensive than the US, too.
10 to 15 times more expensive. That's not just a bit pricier, that's prohibitive. It's an economic wall.
Exactly. It actively excludes the vast majority of citizens from being able to afford financial protection against this kind of disaster.
So why? Why is it so incredibly expensive? What's driving that?
Well, it's complex, but you can boil it down to a few things. First, the global reinsurance market. The big companies that insure the local insurance companies, they see the Caribbean as basically ground zero for catastrophe risk. Climate change is only making that worse in their models.
So the perceived risk is sky high.
Sky high. Second, there's often a lack of really detailed, reliable data on the building stock itself. What's built to code, what isn't, the specific vulnerabilities of different areas. Without good data, insurers have to price in a lot of uncertainty. They charge more to cover that unknown risk, so it's a double whammy. The actual risk from stronger storms is increasing, and the difficulty in precisely measuring that risk across the board also pushes prices up. You got it. The financial system sees the high physical risk, maybe sees inconsistent building practices, and essentially passes that massive potential cost onto the few individuals or businesses who try to get coverage.
It ends up punishing people for living in a high-risk zone where, historically, building resiliently has been difficult or expensive.
Precisely. And Jones broke down who gets hit hardest by this. He mentioned returnees Jamaicans who've worked abroad, maybe come home to retire on a pension.
They use their life savings to build a home.
And they simply cannot afford the insurance premiums. So their entire nest egg, their retirement security, is just sitting there completely exposed to the next storm.
And for local homeowners who maybe built over time, don't have a mortgage.
Same boat, generally. If their home gets damaged, their only option is to try and rebuild slowly, out of pocket. Jones said they have to save sometimes, or they just roll the dice.
Roll the dice. That phrase says it all, doesn't it? Recovery becomes a gamble, dependent entirely on personal savings, which are often scarce to begin with. There's no safety net.
None. And ironically, who is typically covered?
People with a mortgage.
Right, because the bank requires it. The lender insists on insurance to protect their investment, their capital.
So this slam protects the bank's asset, but not necessarily the homeowner's accumulated wealth or life savings if the house is owned outright.
That's the critical disparity. If you're still paying off your house, there's likely an insurance backup to help rebuild. If you own it free and clear, maybe you inherited it, maybe you saved for decades to build it, you're on your own unless you can somehow afford those crippling premiums. Which leads to Jones's conclusion. This storm is a huge blow on the economy, one that Jamaica really didn't need. Because if, say, 80% or more of the damaged properties are uninsured, every single repair requires fresh cash pulled from personal savings or government coffers, which are already strained. Recovery slows to a crawl.
It's not just waiting for an insurance adjuster. It's potentially years, maybe decades of piecemeal rebuilding, hoping another storm doesn't hit before you're done.
And this whole economic reality, this precarity, clearly forced Jones himself to consider some drastic steps.
Yeah, he talked about starting with the basics, picking up the pieces at his own place first, but then looking beyond that.
He mentioned assessing his options, including, and this is significant, potentially dusting off my CV and looking elsewhere again, thinking about leaving Jamaica.
And we need to remember who we're talking about here. This isn't just anyone. You mentioned his background.
His former positions are really high level, working for the palace minister that suggests senior government advisory or management roles.
And director of strategic projects at Cranfield University in the UK.
Cranfield is a top-tier postgraduate university, especially known for technology and management. Being a director of strategic projects there, that's serious expertise in large-scale planning, engineering, and execution.
So a professional of that caliber, someone with global experience who came back to Jamaica, presumably to contribute, maybe care for family.
Is now being potentially forced out again by the economic devastation of the hurricane. That's what's often called brain drain or talent flight.
And the irony is crushing, isn't it? The country desperately needs people with his exact skills, strategic planning, construction management, to rebuild and create more resilience.
And the storm itself is creating conditions that might drive those very people away. It's not just a physical collapse, it's potentially eroding the human capital needed for recovery.
That decision, potentially having to leave, born out of economic necessity, that might be one of the biggest long-term impacts of this disaster. It really might. And it raises that fundamental question. If the private insurance market fails because it's unaffordable and disasters push out skilled professionals, what other options does a country like Jamaica have? How do you build resilience then? A tough question. And layer on top of all this professional and economic anxiety, there's the deeply personal toll.
Yeah, amidst all the talk of rebuilding and finance, the most raw part of the interview was Jones's worry for his family.
The communication blackout was clearly agonizing. He'd only managed to speak to his parents once since the storm hit hardest.
And his in-laws?
Yeah.
Complete silence. I have no idea, he said. Admitted he was extremely worried.
And again, this wasn't just vague worry. It was specific, informed by the disaster reports he was getting.
Exactly. Knowing they were on the outskirts of Mandeville, knowing that was a major flood zone, having heard about houses being submerged there.
Putting those pieces together while being unable to get through. It must be unbearable. It's knowledge becoming a source of torment.
It's a unique psychological burden, isn't it? Processing the disaster analytically, professionally, while simultaneously fearing the worst for your own loved ones caught in the middle of it based on that very analysis.
He's trying to manage what he can control, fixing his own place, thinking about his CV while carrying this enormous weight of uncertainty about people he can't reach.
That duality seems central to his experience. The capable professional facing systemic collapse, and the worried son and son-in-law facing personal potential tragedy.
And even in that state, he expressed empathy beyond his own circle, didn't he? Mentioning the person seen falling from the roof.
Yeah, taking a moment in an interview about his own situation to express prayers for that unknown individual. It speaks volumes about the shared trauma, the human connection even amidst such devastation.
So where did he leave things? Did he offer any final thoughts on the way forward?
He did. He circled back to that call for systemic change. A hope, really, that the government, the country, would take heed this time.
Take heed and do what?
Collaborate. Be more strategic in investments, especially around infrastructure resilience. Learn the lessons from this catastrophe.
So what does strategic likely mean in his context, given his background? We can probably infer some specifics.
I think so. It almost certainly means, first, rigorous enforcement of modern Category 5 level building codes. Maybe finding ways to subsidize retrofitting for the most vulnerable.
Moving beyond just having codes on paper to making sure they're actually implemented everywhere.
Right. Second, it means diversifying critical infrastructure, like we discussed with the airports, but also hospitals, communication networks, power grids, moving key assets inland, hardening them, ensuring redundancy.
Not putting all your eggs in vulnerable coastal baskets.
Exactly. And third, crucially, it has to involve tackling that insurance crisis head on. If the private market solution is 15 times too expensive,
then it's not really a solution for most people.
correct. So strategic might mean exploring government-backed insurance pools or public-private partnerships or some kind of subsidized national climate insurance scheme, something to make basic financial protection accessible.
Because relying on individuals to roll the dice just isn't sustainable for the nation's economy when these storms keep coming. Precisely. It's about making a national calculation. The upfront cost of building resilience and providing affordable insurance versus the recurring, crippling cost of uninsured losses and slow, painful recovery. Jones is arguing for the proactive investment. So the personal toll isn't just the immediate worry, it's the weight of seeing the systemic flaws so clearly and fearing they won't be fixed, leading to this cycle repeating.
Yeah. He's a professional witness to a vulnerability that needs fundamental strategic change. It's an incredibly insightful perspective he shared.
It really is. It gives us such a multi-layered understanding of what a storm like Hurricane Melissa truly means for a nation like Jamaica. Okay, let's try and boil this down. What are the key takeaways for our listeners?
Okay. First, the sheer physical power and its consequences. We're talking sustained Cat 5 winds up to 185 milagers. This led to landscapes being totally changed, decimated trees, total annihilation in towns like Black River, and terrifying flooding, especially around Mandeville.
And this physical destruction paralyzed the country, knocking out critical infrastructure, like both major airports, right when they were needed most.
Second takeaway, and this is huge, is the deep economic vulnerability crystallized by that insurance crisis. Insurance costs being 10 to 15 times higher than the UK effectively locks most people out.
Right, which means recovery isn't about insurance payouts for the majority, it's about scraping together personal savings, rolling the dice, as Jones put it. This makes every major storm a potential knockout blow to personal wealth and the national economy.
And the third key point is the human capital aspect, the risk of talent flight. When even highly qualified, experienced professionals like Dean Jones are forced to consider leaving because the economic situation becomes untenable.
It strips the country of the very expertise it needs to rebuild better and plan more strategically for the future. It's a vicious cycle.
What really comes through is that the existing models for managing risk, particularly financial risk through insurance, they've basically broken down in this context. The market solution isn't working.
Which sets up our final provocative thought for you, the listener, building directly on Dean Jones's insights and his call for strategic change.
If private insurance is fundamentally unaffordable for the majority in vulnerable developing nations, rendering it useless as a widespread recovery tool,
Then what concrete, perhaps non-market mechanisms need to be seriously considered or implemented now? Are we talking about things like mandatory government-subsidized climate insurance programs or large-scale national investment in relocating critical infrastructure away from the most hazardous zones?
essentially, how does a nation proactively manage escalating climate risk when the standard financial tools are out of reach for most of its citizens? What does that strategic investment Jones called for actually look like in practice?
It's the choice, really, between investing upfront in systemic resilience, however costly that seems, or facing repeated, devastating economic setbacks and the slow erosion of the nation's capacity to cope.
A critical question, not just for Jamaica, but for many vulnerable nations facing our changing climate. Something to really think about.
That's our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time.